Imagine plunging into water so cold it should kill you within minutes. Yet instead of dying, your body awakens abilities that seem almost superhuman. This isn't science fiction. It's happening right now, in laboratories and ice baths around the world, where researchers are discovering that cold water might be humanity's most overlooked superpower. In 1912, when the Titanic sank into the North Atlantic's freezing waters, most passengers died within 15 minutes. Yet scattered among the tragedy were survivors who defied every medical prediction, floating in 28-degree water for hours, their bodies somehow maintaining life when textbooks said it was impossible. What separated the survivors from the victims wasn't luck. It was an ancient human ability that most of us have forgotten we possess. The story begins thousands of years ago, high in the mountains of Tibet, where monks developed a practice so extraordinary that Western scientists initially dismissed it as mythology. These Tibetan practitioners could sit naked in sub-zero temperatures, their bodies generating so much internal heat that they could dry wet sheets placed on their backs. The monks called it tummo, inner fire, but what they were actually demonstrating was humanity's dormant relationship with cold that evolution had built into our very DNA. For centuries, cultures across the globe stumbled upon similar discoveries. Russian ice swimmers, Finnish sauna enthusiasts plunging into frozen lakes, and Native American vision quests in harsh winters. All were unknowingly tapping into the same biological mechanism. But it wasn't until the late 20th century that science began to understand what these ancient practices had been unlocking all along. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: brown fat. For decades, scientists believed that brown adipose tissue, a special type of fat that burns calories to generate heat, only existed in babies. This made evolutionary sense. Newborns needed extra warmth to survive. But in 2009, researchers using advanced imaging technology made a shocking discovery. Adults retained significant amounts of brown fat, but only under specific conditions. The trigger? Cold exposure. Dr. Wouter van Marken-Lichtenbelt at Maastricht University was among the first to document this phenomenon. His team placed volunteers in temperature-controlled rooms and gradually lowered the temperature while monitoring their metabolism. What they found challenged everything medicine thought it knew about human thermoregulation. As temperatures dropped, the subject's brown fat began activating, burning glucose and lipids at an extraordinary rate to generate heat. More incredibly, regular cold exposure actually caused the body to generate more brown fat tissue. This wasn't just about staying warm. The metabolic activation triggered by cold water immersion cascaded through multiple biological systems. Heart rate increased, but in a controlled, beneficial way. Blood circulation improved dramatically as vessels constricted and dilated in response to temperature changes. Most surprisingly, the immune system showed significant enhancement. White blood cell counts increased, inflammatory markers decreased, and the body's overall stress response became more resilient. The implications were staggering. Here was a simple, free intervention that could potentially combat obesity, improve cardiovascular health, and strengthen immunity, all through controlled exposure to cold water. But the story was about to become even more extraordinary. Enter Wim Hof, a Dutch extreme athlete who would single-handedly force the scientific community to reconsider the limits of human physiology. Known as the Icemen, Hof held multiple world records for cold exposure, including the longest ice bath, nearly 2 hours submerged in ice water while maintaining normal body temperature. Initially dismissed as a genetic anomaly, Hof made a claim that changed everything. He insisted his abilities weren't unique gifts, but learnable skills. He developed a method combining breathing techniques with gradual cold exposure, claiming he could teach anyone to control their autonomic nervous system, the part of our biology that's supposed to be completely involuntary. The scientific establishment was skeptical until Hof agreed to undergo rigorous testing. At Radboud University Medical Center in the Netherlands, researchers injected Hof with endotoxin, a bacterial component that normally triggers severe flu-like symptoms in healthy individuals. The results were unprecedented. While control subjects experienced fever, headaches, and nausea, Hof's body barely reacted. His immune system had somehow learned to suppress the inflammatory response that should have made him violently ill. Even more remarkably, Hof trained 12 volunteers using his method. When these ordinary individuals were subjected to the same endotoxin challenge, they showed similar resistance. For the first time in medical history, humans had demonstrated conscious control over their immune response. The mechanism behind this superpower lies in the interplay between cold stress and the sympathetic nervous system. When exposed to cold water, the body releases massive amounts of norepinephrine, a hormone and neurotransmitter that acts like nature's own performance enhancer. Norepinephrine doesn't just help generate heat. It sharpens focus, improves mood, and triggers the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that promotes the growth of new neural connections. Research teams around the world began investigating the therapeutic potential of controlled cold exposure. Studies from the University of Virginia found that cold water immersion could significantly reduce symptoms of depression, with effects comparable to certain antidepressant medications. The theory was that the shock of cold water stimulates the sympathetic nervous system and increases the release of endorphins and noradrenaline in the brain. At the cellular level, even more profound changes were occurring. Cold exposure activates what scientists call cold shock proteins, molecules that protect cells from stress and may play a crucial role in longevity. These proteins help maintain cellular function during challenging conditions and may even help prevent age-related cellular damage. Some researchers theorize that regular cold exposure could be a form of hormesis, beneficial stress that makes organisms stronger and more resilient over time. The cardiovascular benefits were equally impressive. Regular cold water immersion improved circulation, lowered resting heart rate, and increased heart rate variability, a marker associated with better stress resilience and longevity. The alternating vasoconstriction and vasodilation caused by cold exposure acts like a workout for the cardiovascular system, strengthening blood vessels and improving their responsiveness. Perhaps most intriguing were the emerging connections between cold exposure and longevity. Studies on laboratory animals showed that intermittent cold stress could extend lifespan and improve health span, the number of years lived in good health. The mechanism appeared related to the activation of longevity pathways similar to those triggered by caloric restriction and exercise. But as researchers delved deeper into cold water's effects on human physiology, they encountered mysteries that pushed the boundaries of current scientific understanding. Some subjects showed improvements in autoimmune conditions after regular cold exposure, despite the fact that cold should theoretically stress an already compromised immune system. Others reported enhanced cognitive function, improved sleep quality, and increased stress resilience that seemed to persist long after their cold water sessions ended. The most puzzling cases involved individuals who appeared to develop an almost supernatural tolerance to cold after months of practice. Their core body temperature remained stable in conditions that would cause hypothermia in most people. Brain scans revealed unusual patterns of activity in regions associated with pain processing and temperature regulation, suggesting that regular cold exposure might literally rewire the brain's relationship with discomfort and stress. Dr. Rhonda Patrick, a researcher studying the molecular mechanisms of cold exposure, discovered that the practice triggers the expression of genes involved in mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new cellular power plants. This could explain the increased energy levels and metabolic improvements reported by cold water practitioners. The body wasn't just adapting to cold, it was fundamentally upgrading its cellular machinery. Recent studies have begun exploring cold water's impact on inflammation, one of the root causes of most chronic diseases. Regular cold exposure appears to reduce systemic inflammation markers while simultaneously strengthening the body's ability to mount an inflammatory response when needed, essentially calibrating the immune system for optimal function. The psychological effects were equally profound. Practitioners reported increased confidence, better stress management, and what researchers termed stress inoculation, the ability to remain calm under pressure in situations far beyond cold water exposure. The practice seemed to build a general resilience that transferred to other life challenges. Yet for all the research progress, significant questions remain unanswered. Why do some individuals respond dramatically to cold exposure while others show minimal changes? Is there an optimal temperature, duration, or frequency for maximizing benefits? Are there genetic factors that predispose certain people to greater cold adaptation? More concerning are the safety considerations. While controlled cold exposure shows tremendous promise, uncontrolled or extreme practices can be dangerous or even fatal. The line between beneficial stress and harmful exposure remains poorly defined, particularly for individuals with underlying health conditions. As we stand on the threshold of a new understanding of human potential, The implications of cold water's hidden powers extend far beyond individual health benefits. In a world facing epidemics of chronic disease, depression, and stress-related illness, could something as simple as cold water immersion offer a path toward better population health? The economic implications are staggering. If regular cold exposure could prevent even a fraction of chronic diseases, the healthcare savings could reach into the trillions globally. Cold water therapy requires no expensive medications, sophisticated equipment, or lengthy treatment protocols, just access to cold water and proper guidance. Yet this accessibility also raises ethical questions. In a world where health outcomes are often determined by socioeconomic status, could mastery of cold exposure create new forms of biological inequality? Would those with access to proper training and safe cold exposure facilities gain significant health advantages over those without? The environmental implications are equally complex. As climate change makes extreme weather more common, could cold adaptation training help humans survive in a more challenging world? Or might our growing reliance on comfortable, temperature-controlled environments be weakening abilities that evolution spent millions of years developing? Looking toward the future, researchers are exploring how cold water therapy might be integrated into conventional medicine. Clinical trials are underway investigating cold exposure as an adjunct treatment for depression, anxiety, autoimmune disorders, and even certain cancers. The results could fundamentally change how we approach prevention and treatment of disease. The technology sector is also taking notice. Companies are developing sophisticated cold therapy devices, apps for tracking cold exposure protocols, and wearable sensors that monitor physiological responses to cold stress. This quantified approach to cold adaptation could accelerate research and make the practice safer and more effective. But perhaps the most profound implication of cold water's hidden power lies in what it reveals about human potential itself. For too long, we've accepted limitations on what our bodies can do, what our minds can endure, and how we can adapt to challenging environments. The cold water research suggests that many of these limitations are learned rather than innate, barriers of belief rather than biology. The practitioners who can sit in ice baths for extended periods aren't genetic mutants or medical anomalies. They're ordinary humans who've learned to access extraordinary abilities that lie dormant in all of us. They've discovered that the body's stress response systems, when properly trained, become sources of strength rather than vulnerability. This realization extends beyond cold tolerance to broader questions about human resilience, adaptation, and the untapped potential within our own biology. If we can learn to thrive in freezing water, what other challenges might we overcome through understanding and training our physiological responses? The ancient Tibetan monks who first discovered inner fire might have intuited something that modern science is only now beginning to understand. The human body contains capacities far beyond what we normally access. Cold water immersion appears to be one key to unlocking these dormant abilities, but it may not be the only one. As research continues, we're likely to discover that cold exposure is part of a broader category of beneficial stressors, challenges that, when applied appropriately, make us stronger, healthier, and more resilient. Heat therapy, breathwork, fasting, and intense exercise may all work through similar mechanisms, teaching our bodies to adapt and thrive under stress. The hidden power of cold water in the human body represents more than just a fascinating scientific discovery. It's a reminder that we've barely begun to understand the remarkable capabilities of human physiology. In our climate-controlled, comfort-seeking modern world, we may have lost touch with abilities that could transform our health, extend our lives, and expand what we believe is possible for human beings. The question isn't whether we can learn to harness the power of cold water. The research clearly shows we can. The question is whether we'll choose to embrace this challenging but potentially transformative practice. Will we step into the ice water and discover what we're truly capable of? Or will we remain in the comfort of ignorance, never knowing the superpowers that cold water could awaken within us? The choice is ours, but the water is waiting, cold, challenging, and full of possibilities we're only beginning to understand. The power has always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to be brave enough to take the plunge and discover what we're truly capable of becoming.